This podcast contains content that may be triggering, so please practice self-care, knowing that you can stop, pause, and regulate at any point. In our description, you'll find a free resource to help you do just that, to ground throughout your listening experience. I am so excited to have Sonja Castaneda-Cudney with us today. I'll read a little bit about Sonja as usual, and then we will jump right in. Sonja Castaneda-Cudney is a mixed methodology policy researcher and scholar at USC Sol Price School of Public Policy, who studies reproductive health, mental health, perinatal mental health, and health equity access to care. She has a background in urban education policy from Brown University and genetics at UW-Madison, and understands that global issues are local issues in today's hyper-connected world. Sonja seeks to provide whole person services and supports, including trauma-informed family planning and reproductive health care for the population of individuals of reproductive age living with serious mental illness, or SMI. Sonja approaches her research through the lenses of reproductive justice, disability rights, critical race theory, and environmental justice. Sonja has experience designing and leading research and education programs nationally and internationally, and loves teaching and making art. Recently, Sonja has been a lead for the USC Healthy Campus Initiative mental health policy and education groups, working to improve upon and identify new ways to support and foster mental health for the USC community, and in a proud peer mentor for and is a proud peer mentor for Postpartum Support International. Welcome, Sonja. I am so glad that you are joining us on Be the Bloom.
Thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here.
Yay, yay. Okay, so there is definitely a lot of expertise that you are just that you hold in the work that you do. And I would love it if you were to share a little bit more about yourself and the story of, how you came to your work.
Thank you for asking. This journey has been very interesting, but I would say it probably really starts with I have loved ones who live with schizophrenia, and they lost their lives to their illness. One lost her life. My aunt lost her life by suicide, living in an institution on the East Coast, um, and that was really devastating to me. And I always wondered. She was one of my favorite people in the whole wide world. One of the most brilliant, happy, amazing people I ever knew, and she really suffered a lot of injustices and dehumanization in the mental health world that we all live with in the United States. And so I think that has kind of prompted me to get into this space. I also had another, friend of the family who was like family to our family, who was murdered by the police in Madison, Wisconsin, who also lived with schizophrenia and needed help. And instead of help, he was beaten and murdered. And I, having a chance to work with Ellen Sachs at the Sachs Institute, a woman who is known for her advocacy for people living with serious mental illness, a person who is known for living with schizophrenia and doing all of these wonderful, amazing things for the community and beyond. It really gave me this opportunity to really know that my loved ones did not have to experience what they experienced, that they could have had a very different life had they had supports instead of the system that we have in place. So starting to work in mental health policy really came from that. But my work in the perinatal mental health space and around reproduction and mental health came from my own experiences. While I was working at the Sachs Institute, I was also pregnant with twins when I first started. So I was running a research project and doing all this work, feeling really good in my body, in my pregnancy with twins.
Mm.
Um, and and my twins and I developed twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome,
Mm.
which is a syndrome that can be fatal if left untreated for myself, for the parent, and for the children. But interestingly enough, I'm working at the Sachs Institute. I was a temporary employee, so I didn't have full insurance coverage. I was on Medi-Cal receiving care in California, and it was not the best care.
Mm.
Um, and we received a misdiagnosis for my pregnancy that said I was a dichorionic pregnancy, which is the safest kind of multiples pregnancy you can have. And it doesn't require that you have extra monitoring during the second trimester. It means that the babies are separate, they're not identical twins, they are not sharing a placenta, is this diagnosis. But that wasn't the case for my family, actually.
Mm.
It was a misdiagnosis. My baby girls were identical twins, and they developed twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome in the second trimester. It happened rapidly. I was textbook symptoms and signs for twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome, but with the misdiagnosis, everybody said that it couldn't be that. So
Mm.
even though I was presenting in all of these ways, every time I went to the emergency room, every time I asked for help, they were like, well, it couldn't be that. Therefore, you're fine. Therefore, you're normal. My pregnant belly was distended. I looked like I was maybe 40 weeks, and I wasn't. I was in my 20s in their gestational period. And my legs swelled to 3 times their normal size. And they looked at my legs, they're like, those are normal legs. And I'm telling these people,
Mm.
no, no, they aren't. This is my body. I know there's something wrong. Somebody help me. Could not get the help. And we ended up having an emergency C-section delivery on Christmas morning
Mm.
when my and I didn't know this, my partner didn't know this either. Nobody told us, but they couldn't detect a heartbeat
Mm.
in our daughter Lucia. So emergency C-section. We all survived, thankfully. My children were rushed to the NICU. We had blood transfusions, but we did survive. And I wasn't able to visit with my children. I couldn't really move, but Daniel, my husband, was with them, and they were in the NICU. I was trying to deal with whatever just happened that was completely unexpected. Um, and um, and we our birth plan didn't go as planned. I will just say that. And I was still working. I was still working during this period
Mm.
because, again, I was a temporary employee. So I was an hourly employee. I couldn't take off work. In my mind, I couldn't take off work. And all of this um, also culminated in one of our daughters passing. With twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome, there's unequal sharing of the blood. So one of my daughters, Ava, was getting the majority of the blood, and my other daughter, Lucia, was not getting enough blood. And that both caused bleeding in both of their brains. And with Lucia, the bleeding was so severe that she was not able to recover, and she did
Mm.
pass away. And so being a parent going through all of this, and working and trying to make sense of it all. My other daughter's still in the NICU, and I'm working. And I keep bringing up the working part because that actually turned into kind of a big part of this.
Mm.
But we're going through that journey, and I work in mental health policy. And I was suffering and couldn't understand it, couldn't make sense of it, was asking for help, but also just none of it made any sense. And we made it through the journey of Ava's stay in the NICU, which was 4 months. When she came home, I think my husband and I both thought, okay, we made it. She's home. Now things will be okay. And for my husband, things got much better and easier. And for me, I got worse and worse and worse and could not make sense of it. Um, and and knowing now what I know about perinatal mental health disorders, again, here I was showing very clear signs of having perinatal mental health disorder, wherein I really got to a point where I thought my family would be better off without me. I thought that I was the cause of all of the challenges that we were having, that it was coming from me. Why couldn't I get better? Why wasn't I feeling normal in this period? Why was I struggling so much
Mm.
um, with connecting with myself, making sense of my heightened fears and anxiety? And when I was a child, my mother really instilled in me to always say goodbye before I leave.
Mm.
And so I had this moment where I was like, I am going to leave my family.
Mm.
And before I did that, I had that thing that my mother told me to do where I had to talk to Daniel and tell him that I had to leave and that I was going to leave. And I'm glad I did because that was really the pathway to finding recovery for me. He really heard what I was saying and helped me to get the help that I needed in this situation.
Mm.
Um, and he found a therapist for me, and that was the first step in that direction. And then as I was getting therapy, this poor person who was my therapist, was not equipped to deal with perinatal mental health disorders. I will tell you that. I think I scared her every day, but she sat with me and
Mm.
she actually also told me, I don't know if I'm equipped for this, but let's keep
Mm.
exploring it. But during this process, I was still working. And as will happen in these spaces, in any space, I would say professional space, but in policy space, I found it so often. But I'm working in mental health policy, and this person comes into the office and they bring up maternal mental health to my boss. And my boss wants to like be nice, but he's like, we're not dealing with this. But you know what? Sonja can deal with this. So let's, this women's issue, let's give it to this lady and send her to this conference. And I will tell you, I
Mm.
ended up going to this maternal mental health conference in Los Angeles that was hosted at the time, I want to say by 2020 Mom. I really, if I'm remembering. And I'm sitting in this conference, don't know anybody around me, don't know anything about this. And there is a person on stage who is telling her story, and it was my story. She
Mm.
was saying what happened to her, and it was the first time that I had heard my inside thoughts and feelings being spoken into the world, into a room full of practitioners and policymakers and change makers in Los Angeles and around the country. Um, and that was my introduction into the perinatal mental health world. And that was the start to my journey in this space and to making this reproductive psychiatric advanced directive, getting the help that I needed, and hopefully making sure that others are able to get the help that they need as well. And maybe don't even have to go through all of this to get that help.
Whew. Thank you. Like, thank you is not enough, right? But the the fact that you can share your story And all of these pieces, right? The family piece, the loss, the grief, the collective pain, the loss of your child. When I talk to folks about what moves them into this work, it is always personal. And it's what keeps so many folks in this work, no matter what, because there is an internal, like, there are people behind them that are pushing this work forward. And so I really appreciate and honor your story and the people who have um, pushed you into this work, and how you're honoring them so that others are not having to go through the same thing, how you're transmuting that pain. So thank you for sharing what brought you to everything that you're doing.
Thank you for listening. So, another thing that I wanted to share that I do think is really important for people to read that made an impact, had a big impact on my life. And with a trigger warning, the article is it goes into pretty gruesome detail of a story of a woman in California who um, experiences a perinatal mental health psychosis and ends up taking the lives of her three children. But this article left such a impact on me. Her name is Carol Coronado. This incident happened in 2014. It was this news story in Mother Jones, and it was published in 2020. And the story really hit home um, how rapidly these mental health issues come on and how people who are so capable and so driven and so organized and so on top of everything and to the external world. You are amazing at what you are doing. You are amazing in your life and you're an amazing parent. And um, and how your brain, as this person, plays tricks on you when you are experiencing
Mhm.
a perinatal mental health challenge. Um, this woman's story is so devastating, but it really, to me, paints a very clear picture of how these things are missed.
Mhm.
They're missed until it's too late. And people who are not, like I myself, I was not great at asking for help. I also
Mhm.
didn't understand what was going on with me. I kept thinking it is me. There's something wrong with me, not this is something that can happen. And if you share it, you can get help. Just what is wrong with me? I am causing all of these issues. And this woman's story was a similar story wherein, in hindsight, her husband and her mother say she called me, she was acting strangely, she was acting out of character, but I thought it was this, I thought it was her not getting sleep, I thought it was stress of this, I thought it was financial stress, I thought it was any number of things that we always just kind of dismiss or um, are clear to us in hindsight. All of these things were happening to this woman, and the outcome was so very tragic. And I think that um, I recently reread this article because it was so impactful to me, but to reread it again in 2025, where my daughter is, 6 going on 7, um, it really took me right back to that place of my mind playing tricks on me, where I felt so hopeless in this situation. I felt so to blame that I was really considering leaving, that I was leaving. I was going to remove myself from this situation. And that was the same thing that this woman had a sense of, is that I
Yeah.
I did this, I'm causing this trouble, I'm doing this. And if I remove myself, then everybody will be better off. And obviously her outcome was much worse. She experienced that psychosis and it really did lead to a horrendous outcome. But it always hits me
Mm.
as to how fast it can happen, how it can happen to anyone, how it can be missed. And if we are able to talk about these things more and identify some of the symptoms and talk about them, then if you start experiencing that, you can say, this is strange. I need to tell somebody. And if you can tell somebody, you can get help.
Yeah. I thank you for sharing that story, because whenever I hear stories like that, whether it's in the news or what have you, I always think we're not having the full conversation here,
No.
right? We're often demonizing this mother and saying, how could she have done something like that to her children? And we're missing the piece about um, we have a culture that misses it. We have a culture that doesn't really uplift and support what it means to just be pregnant, let alone to then have to care for these children without the efficient mental health support behind you. Like, we don't have a culture mm, that is prepared to avoid that. And so I think about how that individual becomes the holder of all of the ways that she was missed. And it's so tough. It's such a complex situation because no one wants to do those harm. Nobody. I mean, any of that. And oftentimes the narrative is, I want to save my family from me, or or people believe this is what is going to be best to keep their family well, or to keep their children well. I have to do XYZ, and our mind plays tricks on us. We are just we're not as expansive in understanding the ways that our minds tell us things sometimes that are not real but feel real.
Feel real.
And so
That was the reality. The
yes,
reality. Yes. Like, and there really isn't a way out of that. If that's your reality and you've always been based in reality before, then why wouldn't this be reality as well?
yes, especially when you're someone who you're a go-getter, you got it together, you're organized, you know how to do things, and okay, this is new. I know how to do this too, right? And so how are we missing folks? So to have something that says to everyone, hey y'all, mental health is like a thing because we all have a brain, and so it's not a judgment, it's just like a thing. Therefore, there are changes that happen at different phases of your life. How do we hold you in these changes? And how do we make sure your voice is present in as many arenas as we can make sure it's present, regardless of what happens in these moments? We want to show up for you.
Yeah.
That can make such a big difference. So, thank you for sharing all that and bringing her into the conversation, because we need to talk more about the cases where folks are missed in order to, sadly, in order to understand the need that is there. Yeah.
Yeah. You know what's interesting, you brought this up with that the kind of hormonal changes that I think
Mhm.
people are not talking about in our reproductive life cycle. I think that this really is something that I hope people start to pay more attention to, is that while you are experiencing these hormonal changes that come upon when you start your menstruation, and then if you get pregnant, and then later in life when you're going through menopause, again, these
Mhm.
hormones do affect your physical health and your mental health, and
Yes,
we need
they
to be
do.
having these conversations. It's not just around the perinatal period. It really is a reproductive life cycle
Yes.
conversation that we need to be having.
And at each stage, and I know this to be a thing, at each stage, the common response is it's me,
Right.
right?
Because you,
Menopause, perimenopause, it's me,
it's me.
right?
It's
Across the board. And so,
what's wrong with me? That's the question, right? What is wrong with me?
and so if
What's
nothing else, I'm hoping folks, yes, take away this tool and also help reframe for themselves. Like maybe it's not you, right? And I'm not lying to you. I'm not, like I'm not trying to you know, because so many folks will be like, but it is me. And I'm like, I honestly will tell people when it's them. But but I invite folks to consider, just consider, maybe it's not you. And so can we talk? Can we seek somebody to talk with, like you did, to seek someone to talk with and to say what is happening for you, whether you feel it's real or not, whether you feel it's you or it's not. Just consider it, right? Because so often people will think it's them when it's not them.
exactly. It's not just you, right? It's not
Mhm.
you alone. It's not, and I think that that is the other thing is that, and I want to own this, like that is a part of my story. That is a part of me. It is something that is still in me, like my
Mm,
experiences and those thoughts, I can still access them. But to have someone to talk about it who understands this, who is able to say, that is what we call this, that shows
mhm.
up so often in these situations. And let's talk about that so that we can
Yes.
get it out of you or like process through it. And so that you know that you are not alone and that it is not real. It is not true. I guess that's the thing is
Yeah.
that it is in your mind. It is not true. This is not true.
Yeah. And I often say to folks, I'm like, your feelings they're real, but they're not always accurate. And so, can we see the difference? Sometimes we're so in it that it's hard to see. So, we might feel like it's real, that it's this, that, or the other, but is that accurate? And so, sometimes we need another voice in there to show a larger perspective. And it is amazing when folks hear, oh, this is actually something that commonly happens and da da da, right? As you were saying, the world opens up. There's so much shame that can get attached to it, and some of the shame falls away. I appreciate you sharing the intersections and knowing that there are so many intersections that you hold, right? Even incorporating what it means to be a parent, what it means to be someone seeking care, to have this, vast background of expertise, but seeing the failings, the gaps, the places where care falls short, even for someone who has the language and, wanting to make a difference. So I see these intersections. Um, and out of that, what you have created, one of the things that you have created is this ReproPAD. And so can you tell us a little, and I know when anybody creates something, it's like lovely to talk about it. And so here's your opportunity to tell us all about it. And I hear what motivated the creation, but who was along with you for this journey?
So this was a concept that was actually, it came about working with Ellen Sachs. So Dr. Ellen Sachs, who is famous for being a genius, MacArthur genius, as well as being an advocate and legal scholar in the space of mental health policy, as a person who lives with schizophrenia,
Mm,
um, and who she's written a beautiful memoir, The
yeah.
Center Cannot Hold. And I worked with her at the Sachs Institute, and she is all about autonomy and decision making for people living with serious mental illness. And
Mm,
so I worked with her on this psychiatric advance directive that is looking at your reproductive health needs while considering your mental health,
mm.
with her and an amazing reproductive psychiatrist, Emily Dossett, Dr. Emily Dossett, who I still fangirl over all of the time. She's both of these people who I worked with had these beautiful opportunity to work with and come up with this idea. They are larger than life people in my life. They're doing amazing work and they have boundless energy and brilliant minds and huge hearts that allow them to do this work. And the ReproPAD came from our discussions around how do we better meet the needs of everyone, knowing that people with serious mental illness are parents, do become parents, do get pregnant. Weird. Can you imagine?
Oh, didn't know. Yeah.
And hearing about that and understanding that people are very quick to or feel okay um, about thinking that people who live with psychiatric disabilities or serious mental illness or experience mental health challenges that they shouldn't have children, right? There's this
Mm,
idea in society that if this is your life, then you should not be having children.
mhm,
And that is a part of our legal system as well, you know.
yeah.
There have been sterilizations.
Mhm,
For people who have cognitive disabilities or who have psychiatric disabilities, and that is a part of the history in the United States.
mhm,
So we came to this work wanting to have conversations about
mm.
people with serious mental illness as whole people
Yeah.
with who have a sexuality and who have sex lives and who get pregnant, who are parents,
Mm,
and or who may want to be parents or may not, but want to have
mhm,
these conversations. And these conversations aren't happening in these spaces. They're not happening when you are getting your mental health care. They're not happening when you're getting reproductive health care. Um,
mhm,
and I would say again, kind of as a part of our legal system in the United States, a lot of people are afraid of this intersection of care. Um, Oftentimes when someone who has serious mental illness or is living with serious mental illness who takes medication, when they get pregnant, the general idea is that you should not be taking medication
mm,
while pregnant or while breastfeeding, and that's very outdated. There's actually plenty of research that supports that you can continue your medication, and certain medications are
mm,
safe or are safer than going off of your medication.
mhm,
You know, so so I would say that we came to this wanting to update the ideas around all of this and the ReproPAD, which is Reproductive Psychiatric Advanced Directive. So an advanced directive, like a medical advanced directive for your psychiatric needs in your reproductive journey.
mm,
And we came to want to do this, and when we decided to go ahead and try to figure out if we can make this tool, we formed an amazing team
mm,
of advocates and peers, scholars, so people who have tons of years of experience in this space, and then new scholars in this space, and people with lived experience. And we formed this team and we created this tool that we hope will be accessible to anyone who can get pregnant. We designed it with people living with serious mental illness. And serious mental illness is living with severe depression, living with schizophrenia, living with bipolar disorder, living with severe anxiety, PTSD. That's serious mental illness.
mm,
So we designed this tool with people with serious mental illness in mind, but really, truly, this tool is for anyone who can become pregnant
mm.
as you are thinking about the risks involved with becoming pregnant, becoming a parent, um, that do affect your mental health.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And really even thinking about how you spoke to some of the ways folks might use it, right? You know, if you're on medication currently, before you become pregnant, and seeing what your choices are, your options, your decision making around staying on the medication, what medications might be most safe for you, all of those pieces. I'm wondering if there are other ways that folks might utilize this. Say, for example, if they somehow are incapacitated, or, what are the other ways that they might utilize this tool?
That's actually exactly what it is for. It is for if you lose the ability to make a decision in the moment, if you lose your capacity to make a decision for yourself, you have a plan. And in your plan, you have specified the treatments that you currently use and the treatments that you are aware work for you. You also have an opportunity to specify who you want to know
Mhm.
about this situation. You can specify the doctors that you're comfortable using, the hospitals or the clinics that you would prefer you be treated within. You also can specify if you are a parent, where your children will be during this time if you are not able to care for them, or who they will be in the care of. If you want your children, if you have multiple children, if you want them to be together, or, this is all, we've mapped all of this out because in this situation, you are not able to speak for yourself, and these decisions will be made for you. And when your decisions are made for you without your voice included in that, it can be extremely traumatic and devastating for family units, and cause further damage down the road and can impede recovery as well. When you're stressed out, you're anxious about what is happening to your
Mhm.
children, what is happening to your body. It's going to cause
Mhm.
further issues. So,
Yeah, I think that's so powerful. The role of decision making in this, right? For folks who haven't heard of an advanced directive in the first place, to then learn about, okay, a psychiatric advanced directive, like that's an option in life, but also a reproductive advanced directive, right? Like let's get everybody in on the ability for their voice to be heard. So I can just imagine someone who is, for whatever reason, incapacitated during pregnancy, during and we know those cases happen, and what it means to have this document, that there is an advocate attached to it. There is, like, you're hearing that person's voice peek out around what they want and be part of, be that conversation and advocated for, even
yes,
if they can't in the moment do that for themselves, right?
that's exactly
um
right.
that is so powerful. And especially when we think about CSA survivors, or survivors of childhood sexual abuse, or, survivors of sexual violence in adulthood, I wonder the connections that might be there for you with something like this for them, especially during pregnancy or birthing.
Well, when I think about this, I really kind of think about adverse childhood experiences. So the
Mm.
ACEs, which again, like I think as any tools that are out there, I think that that's not the only way to look
Mhm.
at situations. It's not a guarantee. If you score high on the ACEs, you're not guaranteed
Mhm.
to for it to lead to all of these negative outcomes in your adulthood. But it does play into that, right? It
Mm.
does play into that. And so childhood sexual abuse is considered an ACE. And people who score high on ACEs have a higher chance of developing serious mental illness in their adult life. And also for those who do not have a history of a serious mental illness diagnosis, but do become pregnant, you have a higher chance of developing a perinatal mental health challenge or
Mm.
mental health disorder during your perinatal period. And that right now is kind of finally being updated to extend from conception to 2 years postpartum.
Yeah.
But again, this actually can
Mm.
happen at any time postpartum in this perinatal mental or perinatal life cycle.
Yeah.
Um, so, so yeah, so I think of it in that way. um, that our experiences in our life can contribute to our mental health in our adulthood. And I think that everybody should be talking about the
Mm,
risks and challenges that are a part of becoming a parent, a part of becoming pregnant. And I think that we should be talking about them so that we're not so freaked out or surprised by what we may be experiencing, that it becomes much more normal to talk about these things so that they are less scary, so that people understand that if we're talking about it, that your mental health can be treated and supported in ways that work for you, and then for your perinatal mental health challenges, that you're not alone, that these things are common and they're 100% treatable. So it's
mhm.
really, I really want for this tool to be used for anyone or available to anyone who can become pregnant so that we're having these real conversations about mental health and reproduction.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, um, there's so much there. One of which is this universal approach, which is designed for folks who are maybe impacted the most or the most kind of under-resourced in terms of the availability of a tool like this for them, and yet it's applicable across the board to anyone. That is so important. And I think of it through this lens of stigma, right? Thinking about survivors who are already sitting with stigma, and also survivors who don't even know that what they experienced was CSA, was abuse, and therefore often could fall within the cracks. I've met many survivors who, when we speak, there's a realization of, oh, I didn't realize that I was having a really hard time postpartum because of of CSA that had happened to them, that they hadn't made the connection. And so I wonder about providers or how to introduce this to folks um, who might be a little sitting with the stigma of, okay, I don't think I need something like that, right? How would you invite a provider to even think about introducing this to their patient?
I mean, in my ideal world,
Let's go with the
for me,
ideal.
for me as a person living in this world, I love all of the information. I just want to
Mhm.
have all of the information. I understand that not everybody is like that. But in my mind, when somebody is talking to me and bringing me information, that is, I feel like that's a stepping stone towards building trust with this person, that
Mhm.
they're able to come to me to talk about things that might be challenging, might be scary. That is a pathway towards actually getting somewhere with this person. Um, I feel like sometimes in these situations, we want to like handle with care, but then that handling with care becomes avoiding things that we think might be too hard or too much for people,
Mhm.
rather than just delivering information in a way that, again, it's like it's trauma-informed communication, but really is saying, I work in this position. I'm aware of these tools and I'm aware of these situations that are a part of this pregnancy journey, a part of this parenting journey. And I want to talk to you about this. If there's anything that I say that is uncomfortable, you can stop me at any time. I'm doing it for
Mm.
these reasons. We don't have to make a decision now. I want to introduce this this topic. I want to introduce it. And if it's too much, we have time to do it later. It's really this handling with care in a way that is truly caring, which
Mm.
is giving the information to people so that people can make informed decisions about their care, have honest conversations about their situation, and about challenges that can arise, and that actually do arise.
Mm-hmm.
that are
Mm-hmm.
common. You know, one out of every five pregnancies can result in a perinatal mental health challenge or mental health disorder, and that rate is higher for our populations who our Black and brown populations, our LGBTQ populations. Like the rate is higher, so that's one in five for like the overall population. But when we're talking about all of these other intersections, I think that in my dream world, we'll have practitioners who are able to have these conversations, introduce these risks, while also empowering their
Mm-hmm.
patients to know about them and plan for them in ways that are supportive and in their own time. And I understand that obviously we don't always have a lot of time, especially when we're getting reproductive health care, when these services are not covered, or mental health care when these services are not being
Mm-hmm.
covered. So, in my ideal world, we'll be able to do this in a trauma-informed way, and it should be, and our mental health practitioners or our reproductive health practitioners will have the time to do so. But I understand that that is not necessarily the world we're living in. So,
But I think it sets such a good intention out there because it also doesn't seem impossible. You know, like I think
I
about,
agree.
yeah, like I think about a world where, um, I appreciate the language that you give because in there you're giving folks like a spiel, right? And that is applicable across the board and what it is to say to a patient, we do this with everyone. This is just the way that we practice here. And we may not have the time right in this moment to go through all of it, but we want to make another appointment with you to do that. Right. And maybe that's not the provider themselves, like the doctor or the nurse, maybe it's someone else.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
so
a
they're,
really big consideration that our team, when we were forming this tool, was we want a peer component
hmm,
to assist with this. We understand the power dynamics in all of these spaces, and we understand that as a barrier to accessing care and accessing um, informed decision making, and really just a barrier to care is that power dynamic. And we really did think that one way around that would be to have
hmm,
a peer support who you would work with to go through the reproductive psychiatric advanced directive.
hmm,
And it is something that I also want family planning and discussions around your sexuality and reproductive health to be a part of what we're talking about in our mental health appointments. And in those reproductive health appointments, I want us to be talking about our mental health and like our coping strategies. Like, I want these things to be normalized. I want us to have time to talk about them so that everyone who is receiving this care understands that their whole person is being considered, rather than just like, oh, I'm dealing with my mental health and this is how I deal with it. And
hmm.
then I'm dealing with my reproductive health and then I'm dealing with my physical health. And then, like, how does that work for anyone, really?
Well, a lot of times it doesn't,
It
right?
does.
Because it becomes more to hold,
Mhm.
whereas when you're going in for care, that doctor is actually such a great, um, frontline person to be able to share information that if you're going to the doctor, if you're going to get those checkups, they're going to be the one that you see directly who can give you that information and it's going to resonate with you. And that might be the offshoot for other connections,
Oh,
but there
definitely.
has to be a holistic approach, which we know doesn't happen across the board. But I think it's really important to hold that hope and hold that intention and that goal because we can get there. I believe we can get there. So,
I fully believe that. And I also think that, like, I really do, I'm considering practitioners so often, right? Like, how much do you have on your plate? How much time
yeah.
do you actually have with your clients? And what are these things that keep coming up that do make it really difficult to fully serve your clients?
Hmm. Hmm.
And but I believe in our practitioners that we we can be comfortable with not having the answers to everything and not knowing everything, and at the same time be equipped to open these conversations, to have these conversations
Mm.
so that we can, if we collect a bit of information, we can say, oh, this information, I might not be able to help you with this, but I know someone who can. I know a person. I
Yeah.
can help direct you to someone who can help you in these ways. And that's really what I hope for. I hope that when people are looking at this tool, they don't expect me, or sorry, they don't expect that I expect them to be experts in all of this. I just want them to feel comfortable enough to be having these conversations and knowing that there are tools out there, um, and that we can find other ways to help support this whole person care.
Yeah, yeah. And, probably not to get too in the weeds, but in my mind, I'm even thinking about, I remember when I was having um my kiddos, and one of the things that I got was a folder with forms I had to fill out, and I had to make sure to take them to the hospital or deliver them beforehand or something, right? And then when you leave the hospital, you get all of these different forms and booklets and all these things, right? It's like great vehicle during the pregnancy time when you get that folder to also have something like this, because I know my doctor's office has a medical advance directive, and we'll take a few minutes to talk about it, right? So I say that just to kind of reiterate your point of um, you don't have the answer on exactly the way it's going to best fit for this doctor here or that doctor, or understanding the time crunch and all of that, but that there are ways
There are
that
ways.
this can become part of the culture, part of what just happens. And the more people know about it, the more that can actually move forward. So I'm wondering, what's the future of it look like? Like, how would somebody actually get a hold of it? And what do you hope, aside from the use of it, like, where is this going to go next?
Well, I love this question. So people can read about the Reproductive Psychiatric Advanced Directive online. We're in the Archives of Women's Mental Health. So this
And
was
we'll
published
put a link to it as well so you all can get it.
2023. Yes, there's a link. So please read. It's not too long. It's actually a pretty brief read about the background of how we came to this tool. And then there is the tool there. So for practitioners, I think this is a really great way to access the tool and not even invest too much time, but a good amount of time so that you can become acquainted with the tool. Um, and that's what we have right now. I am working on in my dissertation research. I'm doing a project that is collecting feedback from practitioners in the reproductive space and mental health space, as well as potential users, so clients in this other situation, about how accessible this tool is for them in their different situations and their different roles. And so right now we created the tool. We need to figure out how people can use it, real feedback from real people, and we need to pilot this if there is a way to do so. So in my future, I would love to design a program that includes family planning conversations, that includes trauma-informed care techniques, um, comprehensive care planning for people, as well as the formation of a peer-supported completion of the Reproductive Psychiatric Advanced Directive. I think that all of those things combined could be a really wonderful pathway forward. I also understand that that's a really big ask for clinics to try with me, but I would love to do it. So at this point, we have the tool. It is published. You can use it. You can adapt it for your population as a practitioner. You can use it as an individual if you are so inclined. But there, we don't have a scaffolding in place yet, wherein the Reproductive Psychiatric Advanced Directive can be used, or a protocol yet. But also, I do want to say that there is a innovation project happening in California. It is called the California Psychiatric Advanced Directives Project, so the California PADS project. And that is happening. They're about to enter into their second phase, but this is being piloted in 5 different counties in California. And the goal is to have people completing psychiatric advanced directive. So not the reproductive psychiatric advanced directive, but a psychiatric advanced directive, a blueprint of how you would want your care to go in the case of a mental health challenge or an emergency wherein you do not have the capacity to to speak for yourself. You would make a plan while you are in sound mind and body around your mental health treatment and preferences in your mental health and physical health treatment. So in California, they are piloting this. They're working with different goals in each of the counties that are based around their specific populations. And the goal is to have a like a cloud-based protected database wherein psychiatric advanced directives could be completed and stored so that people who need access to these plans would be able to get them for the different levels of care that a person may need
Mm.
in situations. And so the Reproductive Psychiatric Advanced Directive that we completed and created, we also have people on our team who are working as consultants with this California Psychiatric Advanced Directives
Mm.
project. And we had been working to get our ReproPAD section included in this statewide
Oh.
project. So there is a future here.
Mhm.
Again, we're trying to figure out exactly what that looks like, but we're trying to work together so
Yeah.
that it becomes a more common that people are considering their their mental health and making a plan for it so that um, when I know we're all very aware of
Mhm.
the violence and death, unnecessary death that
Mhm.
occurs when people are experiencing mental health challenges or emergencies. And we really hope that psychiatric advanced directives is a pathway away from those terrible outcomes.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. This I'm excited about. Yeah. Oh, because I mean, you're in the process. You've created this tool and now you're seeing it, they're at the next stage of it, right? Um, I, I always ask folks what is a tool that they would like and think are essential for providers to know. And you've just shared a very big one. Um, are there any other tools like books, articles, anything else that trainings that you find um, really is important in the work that care providers offer for them to have?
I actually attended this really great, it was just a brief training. It was kind of like an introduction on perinatal substance use.
Mm,
And I cannot recommend this more.
mm,
I think this is another area that people are not talking about. Substance use in general. I
mm,
think we really shy away from it. It feels dangerous and we don't want to make the problem worse, so therefore we don't talk about it. And I really believe, again, similar to the Reproductive Psychiatric Advanced Directive, where talking about mental health and reproduction together. I think that if we are also talking about substance use in a more normalized way, the stigma can really start to be chipped away for ourselves and
yeah.
for providers and for the world. So I attended this perinatal substance use small training, and there's going to be a larger training. I believe it's going to be offered through Postpartum Support International as well as the Policy Institute,
Yes,
which used to
yeah.
be 2020 Mom. So I believe they're linking up together to offer this training. And the amazing, brilliant mind behind the training for my session was Dr. Jacqueline Tynan. I hope I'm saying her last name correctly. But she's based in Colorado and she works with, let me see, I have a note here for myself around this.
And that we can make sure to put a link to it so folks can
Okay, awesome.
learn more.
Yeah, I will, if I find it, I'll tell you the organization that she's working with. But again, they really focus on substance use during the perinatal period and how do we support people in that part of their journey, especially considering how stressful pregnancy and parenting is, and the coping mechanisms that we have formed for ourselves in the past, and how those may not be safe or even serving us in these other spaces. But if we don't have other ways of dealing with it or aren't able to rewire our brain, because substance use rewires your brain with your reward centers and all of this, that we're really just doing a disservice to families and parents and society. So,
Yeah. And even
so I would
thinking,
recommend that as a training that people should look out for. I learned so much from it, even in the small training that I had.
good, good. Thank you for sharing that, especially because um, w- in substance abuse, conversations, a lot of times what gets left out is the role of trauma and how a lot more research is coming forward about the correlation between traumatic events or the ACEs with substance use in adulthood, right? So if we treat it just through this one lens, which for a long time has been just genetic, we lose some of like the other pieces, and then we don't treat necessarily the trauma that correlates. And then because part of that has been like, the conversation around reproduction as well has been like judgment over that person, that they could have made a different choice, that they should have, but the some of the motivation, actually all of the motivation comes from many different facets,
Yeah.
and we've got to hold all of them so that we relate differently to that person and that child and make different decisions in terms of resourcing them and offering care and support, um, to reduce further trauma. So I'm 100% with you. I think we need more overall education about the way all of this works together in the reproductive time. Um,
I do want to add, just
yeah,
so
please
that
do.
we're here. So Dr. Jacqueline Tynan provided the training on perinatal substance use, and she works with connecting the dots. And
Good.
so that is the organization that is also a part of this. And the training is provided through Postpartum Support International and the Policy Center.
Yeah,
Mhm.
thank you for letting us know the organization. And I think it's actually such a great name, Connecting the Dots, because we need to connect more of those dots for folks.
That's what
Uh,
actually reminded me of it as you were talking. I'm like, well, this is the whole thing. And I often forget to say that. I think, again, this is the space
mm,
that I occupy all of the time. I am working here and I'm studying here, I'm researching. And for me, it is very obvious that that much of the challenges that I would say care providers are facing
mm,
are sometimes their inability to recognize that the person that they are interacting with is having trauma responses
yeah.
in these situations. And that those trauma responses do not allow for people to articulate clearly or
Mhm.
to not have emotion in certain situations. There are a lot of things at play, and I think that that's why that trauma-informed approaches and trauma-informed communication, trauma-informed care is so essential here. So that if
Mhm.
we have a better understanding of how trauma can can impair us
Mm-hmm.
in these situations, then if we are using trauma-informed approaches, hopefully we're not getting into that space. Hopefully we are making the space where the care is supposed to be being, given and received, we're making that space safe, which
Mm.
allows for the care to be accessed,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So that's such a huge part of all of this. And it is also such a huge symptom of the medical system is that when somebody starts behaving in a way that is scary to you as a provider or
Mm.
alarming to you as a provider, you end up in this space where you feel justified in not giving this person care.
Mm.
And I don't know who that's serving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's even a larger cultural thing, right? Like we deem certain people acceptable for certain levels of care and others who have to be controlled. And so how do we de-escalate versus, go to what is so often utilized as a tool, which is control? And I don't think anybody really walks around wanting to do that. Majority of folks don't, but don't know what else because when we're all triggered because we're triggered by other folks and we don't know how to regulate that, then we just react. And so to be able to go to a training to know, okay, this is what's happening for this person. This is what's going on for them. I can understand that to the best of my ability through what I'm learning. And here's how it shows up in my work, and here's how I'm going to respond versus react. There's
Yeah,
power in that.
so much power in that.
Yeah.
And the outcomes that you can achieve on the other side of that, like I just think that most people who get into this area, this line of work, this line of providing mental health care or reproductive, health care in
Yeah.
general, you do that because you really want to help people. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that there is actually a pathway to
Yes.
helping people and to provide that care where they can access it, right? I think that so many people spend all of this time learning all of these things, and then you can't get it to the person because these other barriers are happening for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I think
Mm.
that I am always considering that trauma aspect and
Yeah.
how interconnected everything is. But I do maybe I forget to mention that as I talk about these things. So I'm
Well,
glad
it's just so part of what you know is true, right? And I think that, this is the piece on all of us being able to remind ourselves, and I say, very much thinking about providers as well, that we're all human. And so there's such this heavy expectation that we know everything, that we get it all right, that we have the answers, and that we can control what is happening in our arena so that that is a sign of our professionalism, a sign that we know what we're doing versus like, oh, but because we're human, and if we keep going back to reminding ourselves, hey, I'm human too, I have the capacity to be where this person is to some degree and be dysregulated. Okay, well, what are we going to do about it? How do I regulate myself so that I can show up for them in their very human response? Um, I think that's really important, especially as we think about the ReproPAD and the ways in which folks are engaging in conversations, hopefully with patients, to say, you know, so much may show up for you, but here's a tool that I want to offer you for really your humanness during this time. um I'm wondering, can you share with us what it looks like and what folks can expect in just looking at it?
sure. Let me pull that up. All right. Can you see that?
Yeah.
So here you have the template. So we have designed this tool. It is a template. Right now, it's really something that you would use to fill out in a paper form. You can fill it out in a digital form as well. But we have the template here, and We wanted to keep it in language that is accessible to anyone. It should not be overly medicalized language so that anybody can use this, and answer the questions in a way that makes sense to them. So again, right at the top, the template is for anyone who can become pregnant. So we did design this for people living with serious mental illness or with a serious mental illness diagnosis. But this tool is really for anyone who can become pregnant. And the goal, clearly stated, is to think about and write down what your decisions about medical and psychiatric care would be if you became pregnant. And in that situation, we're not able to make your own decisions, speak for yourself in that time. So if you were incapacitated, you were not able to speak for yourself during this time. This is a plan for you where your voice can be present when you are not able to use it.
Mm.
And then we go and we start with medical history. And this is just so you know, like when we formed this, we really had this amazing team. So we had a legal advocate, we had a reproductive psychiatrist, we had a maternal fetal medicine specialist, we had a medical student, we had a law student, and then we have peer mental health advocates and legal professionals. And a policy expert. So we have all of these people working on this document,
Mm.
and using our experience in these spaces to form this so that the tool is useful for the individual and also useful for the people providing care in this moment. So we need to know your medical history. And we go through this. Do you have these? Pregnancy history. We also need to know this if we're going to be able to provide you adequate care. Um, do you talk about your pregnancy history? Have you been pregnant before? How many times? Have you had missed pregnancies or miscarriages or stillbirths? Were your babies born early? And then how many weeks? So we're going through all of this. We really want to know, and this helps us to be able to provide better medical care in your pregnancy period. And then blood transfusions. Was there any, if you delivered vaginally, were there any injuries to the baby? These are all things that we need to know so that we're considering all of your safety and your whole body care in a delivery. Then we go into medical decisions, informed consent. And so this is guiding healthcare providers in your medical care. Again, when you're not able to make these decisions for yourself, we always bring this up so that it's showing up everywhere so that you are understanding why we're doing this. Um, so consent for life-saving procedures. Would you agree to the following procedures if it was needed to protect your life? So an induction, your pregnancy induction, a C-section. And we go through and we explain these things because again, maybe people working in these spaces think that these terms are very common. Not everybody uses these terms. You may not know. So we wanted anybody to be able to fill this out and to know what these things mean. A C-section is surgery to remove the baby from the mother's belly. That's very basic language. You can understand that and ask
Mm.
and ask yourself this question and say, am I comfortable with this being something that is done? And then again, we go through like vacuum or forceps, blood transfusion. Would you agree to the following procedures if it was needed to protect your baby's life? We go into this. We want to know where are these priorities for you? Again, the same selections as above. And then we go into anesthesia, pain control. What are you okay with? What are you not okay with? And then we go into breastfeeding or chest feeding. If it is possible, would you like to nurse your baby? Would you like your baby to have formula only? We're really getting into these because a lot of times these decisions are made for the parent, and these are big decisions. So your voice, your wants can be specified here. Um, Donated breast milk. Do you want to use that if you're not able to breastfeed, produce your own breast milk? Would you like to try to pursue that? And then we talk about custody of the current pregnancy. If you needed someone to take care of your baby for a short time, who would you choose? please provide their contact information. If you need your baby to go into a longer period of care, who is that person? How do we contact them? And then your other children, who do you want them to be staying with? And then how about if your baby has siblings, do you want everybody to be together? How far, what are the priorities in this situation? And is there anybody that you would not want your children in the care of? And you don't
Yeah.
have to go into why. You do not have to justify your decisions. You just specify your decisions. If you want to, you can, but you can specify here. And then family planning. Let's talk about this. Do you want to have more children? When might you want to do that? How important is it for you to prevent pregnancy from happening in the meantime? Again, we're just trying to figure out your priorities in these situations so that we can help you to achieve those things and understand if you do become pregnant, is this something that is going to, cause more hardship or, is this something you're open to? It's just really, again, getting into these conversations.
Mm.
And then we talk about birth control. What are the different kinds? What would you prefer? What do like we get into a bit of the detail about what these birth control methods are. And then we have psychiatric care in your pregnancy. So we talk about psychiatric medication and certain risks. And obviously, we do not go into all of the risks that are out there, but we do mention that you can make a decision about this based on the risk to you, based on the risk to the child, and based on how, like what that looks like for your specific situation. And we also talk about, depending on how bad certain symptoms are, and how much they impact your life and how stressful they can be, it can be helpful to think about these things. So let's talk about them now while we can. And we talk about your current medications and we get the name and the dosage and when you take it. We need all of this information to be able to support you in the best way that we can if you are not able to specify this information for us.
I
Um,
also like this question you have here about will you will most likely have a mental health doctor and a prenatal care doctor. Would you like them to talk to each other about your care? Do you prefer one of them to be in charge? Because that um, may not be something that that person is thinking about unless it's brought to their attention. Hey, you've got these different care providers. Do you want them to get together to talk about what's going on for you? And then, okay, well, there's a form to be filled out, right? And oftentimes, once somebody is to the place of being like, okay, I need them to talk, then you got to figure out where the forms are. You have to get both forms to, each of the person, and then you have to schedule, and it's a whole thing. So
it's a
to
whole
do this beforehand, if you're incapacitated, it's already done.
right. Well,
Yeah.
and also, even if you're not, like, again, if you're not legally incapacitated, how difficult is it to speak on this stuff when you are in labor or when you
Yeah,
are
that's very true.
in your perinatal period, when you're having some other difficulties? Like, having a plan where you have thought about this and it
Mm,
was you who made these decisions and to reference that. I swear, if I had had something
mm,
like this in my experience, I know it would have been much more helpful than having to face and answer questions that I was being asked to feel during these times when honestly, I can't even remember what a lot of those questions are because of all of the stuff that I was dealing with.
yeah,
And I
yeah.
also love that question that you brought up because I think it's also important to communicate who do you want to take the lead in this environment. Oftentimes, you'll find in medical situations, it is hard to get all of your doctors to communicate together because there are conflicting goals or like your priorities. One doctor's priority is taking care of this part of your health, and another's is taking care of this, and they can be at odds.
Yeah.
So it also helps to place your priorities, your medical care priorities, in a way that will allow for the things that are your priorities to be at the forefront, right? It clears the pathway for the care that you want.
And I think anybody could utilize that. I think that's just so helpful overall.
Yes,
It's
I
great.
agree with you. This is what I want. I want anybody to have these conversations. Let's talk about this. This section here
Mm.
is, I think, essential for pregnancy, whatever, if like for family planning, to have these conversations, just
Yeah.
to be thinking about this. Um, and then again, we have optional questions, optional sections. So we have an optional section on abortion. We have it as optional because in the state of California, which is really ahead of the game in a lot of spaces when it comes to reproductive health, and having abortion access. At the same time, if you are incapacitated, you are not able to make an advance directive that that can be used, right? It can be considered. So you can make this advance directive and place your wishes here with your reasoning for it so that people have access to it. But again, it does not stand in place for you. Um,
So
so you're
can you
not going to
clarify?
be able to get an abortion. If you specify here and you are incapacitated, you cannot access an abortion.
So for example, in the state of California, you you can't fill this out during a moment where you're incapacitated because it won't count as much. It'll
Sorry.
be
Yeah, you can. So a psychiatric advance directive is not to be filled out when you are incapacitated. It's to be
yes.
filled out before. But what I'm saying is, in the state of California, even as forward thinking as we are here, you may not fill out an
Mm.
advance directive that is, if you do end up to be incapacitated, you will not be able to use your advance directive decisions to
Mm.
access an abortion. Does that
Okay.
make sense?
Yeah, I get what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, so, but we thought, even with that understanding, it is important to have your wants clearly stated here so
Yes.
that in this situation, it is still known. Like if you were to say, I do not want to be pregnant, and these are the reasons, and this and this and this, or whatever,
Hmm.
that people understand that as they are going through your care
So your
with you.
voice is still in there,
Still there.
but it doesn't have as it's, that's just privy to whatever the law at the time. Yeah. Okay. That's good. Thank you for, and is that across the board with the other consideration optional topics?
No, so again, and this is how medical advance directives work as well. Psychiatric advance directives is a place for you to state your wishes,
Mhm.
and it is a legal avenue that if you have this document and people go, your care providers go against your wishes, you have an avenue forward to, to sue
Mhm.
there's a way to hopefully receive justice that you had this plan and it wasn't followed. At
Mhm.
the same time, a psychiatric advance directive and medical advance directive cannot be followed to a T in every situation. It is always like if it can be, that's what we can do. If it cannot for any reason, that
Yeah.
is also a possibility. That's just the way that things work. Is
And
that
that's with any document.
with anything? Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So I think it's important to also acknowledge that.
Thank you.
And then we have electroconvulsive therapy or shock treatment, which is it is controversial. It's not available to everyone, but we did include a section for this as well.
Okay.
But again, it is like an optional section
Mhm.
because it's not available to everybody, and we understand that. But we wanted to make sure that it is included.
Awesome. Thank you for walking us through that and all the different pieces. It helps anybody who is interested in using it to get the guidance along the way so that maybe it feels a little less intimidating for them walking through it themselves, but also to get the breakdown is so, so helpful. Um, so I ask everyone because I think it's really important. Even though, in many ways, a lot of the topics we talk about in various episodes, we're talking sometimes to care providers more directly, but we're always bringing in the perspective and or the consideration of the survivor in that, and feeling our way through that there are a lot of folks who are making all of this work and involved in all of it, right? And so we can't leave anybody out of the conversation. So I like to ask folks, for the survivors listening to this conversation, knowing that they have the right to this, they have access to this. Is there anything that you would like to say to them or you would like for them to know? That can be anything at all.
Honestly, I think it's always important to know that if something doesn't feel right while you are accessing care, it is okay to walk away from that situation and protect yourself and to take the time to do that. I think it's very important. And I speak on this because I think I live with a lot of regrets in this space that I think even though alarm bells were going off internally for me for certain situations, I went along with it because I didn't want to make waves or I didn't want the provider to be upset with me and give me subpar care. There's real danger in these situations with the power dynamics and people who have control over your health and your health care and your life and the life of your children. Um, I think that it is not always safe to do that, but I do think it's still important to pay attention to what is happening in your body in certain situations. And if you're able to try and slow it down
Mm,
and to try to sometimes have a script that you can access or pull out of your pocket to be able to ask questions or get information in a way that is so sad to say, but not going to hopefully lead to someone mistreating you or taking what you're saying the wrong way. I think in
mm,
a lot of situations, if I wanted more information, it felt like I was challenging the provider.
mm,
And it did lead to unsafe situations or me being dismissed. Um, at the same time, we all deserve to get the information that we need, and we also deserve um, to be able to take a pause if we need to and to regulate our bodies. And it's really hard to do so. Sometimes we don't have a lot of time, things are moving really fast, but I think that that is what I would like to say.
mm.
Um, and hopefully we'll just keep making progress towards better care. Um, yeah.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that with folks. My last question for you is there anything that I didn't ask that you feel is important to say?
Hmm. You ask such great questions. I love talking with you. You're always
Mm.
so brilliant, Abby and Ebony, and I'm so happy to be having these conversations.
Oh, same.
Um, let's see. We covered a lot of ground here.
Yeah.
I guess, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Okay,
We could do that. Let's do that.
okay. I want to ask you this question. How do, would you, how would this tool, this reproductive psychiatric advanced directive, how do you envision it being used? Do you envision it more coming from a provider, or do you think that do you envision someone coming into the space as an individual and saying, I would like to complete this? Like, I don't know. I just want to know your thoughts.
Yeah. I mean, the way I see it is that probably multifaceted because um, the need is high because it hasn't existed um, for a community of folks who, um, it's tricky to use the word invisible, but like folks would generally, as a culture, we tend to want to look away, right? And so,
We make people
um,
uncomfortable.
yeah, that's why when you said, like, what folks with serious mental, illness are having, yeah, who would have thought, right? Because so much of that is framed. Being pregnant, being postpartum, parenting is framed in a very specific way. And it's kind of like this in-group, out-group dynamic that happens. And so we look away from the out-group because, many different reasons for many different folks. But I say that all to say when there's such a vast gap, there is such a need for multiple facets of approaching it. So thinking about this larger California, like integration within that larger California psychiatric, kind of like that project that's being done around psychiatric advanced directives, that would be lovely, right? You hit this larger kind of piece there. And also what it means for, doctors' offices to be spearheading working with their patients and making sure that it's in everybody's, prep paperwork. As you were speaking, I thought about, oh my goodness, how do we get this to be part of birth plans? Right? Like I when I was doing my birth plan for both my kids, the first one, like I was learning. With my second one, I got my birth plan down the way I wanted it. And I had I had a labor and delivery plan, and then I had a postpartum plan because I wanted the teams in both areas to know exactly what I wanted to happen in regards to my body, my child, who's going to go with my child to get while I'm getting taken care of, who's going to go with my child to get the different, pricks and, wrapped up and put a diaper, all those things. I wanted to be very clear. But what would it mean to also have this as part of that? That's pretty powerful. So I think there needs to be a lot of organizations who do a lot of this work. I even think about, Cactus and Bloom. How do we attach this to the work that we're doing? How do other organizations who are doing lactation support, how do they attach it? Because I'm guessing you can also do this postpartum,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah,
those
you can do
first
this at
two
any point. You
at
can.
any point. And
Mhm.
those first 2 months are terrible.
Yeah.
It's just
Say
gonna
it.
just any parent out there listening knows what I mean, right? Like you don't sleep, you are up, like if you're the birthing parent and you choose to nurse or you choose to, chest feed or what, you're doing it quite often. It's painful. My mental health tanked during those first 2 months. And I even was, dealing with high blood pressure because I hadn't slept more than like 3 hours at a time. I had to be like held up to nurse while, it was a lot. And so, what does it mean for lactation consultants to come in if somebody is needing that help and that support, whether in the hospital or even after, to offer this? This is a multifaceted, I think it needs a multifaceted approach. And so I see it everywhere,
Yeah.
but that's just in my mind.
Okay, well, I do too. So I love this.
Yes.
I also see it everywhere. And actually, as you were saying that, I was thinking for a lactation consultant to also, if it is appropriate or helpful to say, like, I am on this medication. These are some of the side effects. This is what also makes it really challenging. And maybe it's affecting my milk production. Maybe it's like there are, or maybe I take my medication at this time and I don't want to, I don't want to use this breast milk. Or how long does it take for
Yes.
the medication to wear off from this breast milk, which is a thing. Again, you can
Yes.
end up with like clean breast milk after a certain period of time. But again, having specialists who understand this much better, working with other specialists who understand this part and getting that information together, like
Hmm.
priceless,
It's
really
huge. And
priceless.
a lot of mental health challenges postpartum can stem from just the process of nursing,
Yeah.
just the process of how to feed your kid. And I always say, I mean, I say it jokingly, but I believe it, and I'll say it as much as I need to say it. You have this kid, and then you are expected to keep them alive and feed them and make sure they're clean and make sure that they're, I mean, all the things, right?
So many things.
It is a lot to ask. Even if you sign up for it, it's still a lot to ask. And there needs to be a better culture of care. And so, how does a lactation, consultant come in and within the scope of their practice be able to say, okay, well, here's what I'm hearing your needs are around nursing. Here's what I hear you want. You're on this medication. Is the lactation consultant and the psychiatrist and the mental health provider and are folks talking,
Right.
right? And so the different scopes can work in terms of here's what this patient wants for their child and for themselves. How do we support them in making that happen versus you go off and go make an appointment, which, hey, that is how it works, right?
It is how it works.
It's how it works, but can we have a whole team system so that we can reduce mental health challenges and increase the care and wellness?
Yeah.
So I see this as a great vital piece of that. And I'm so glad that we got to talk about it and that we got to you know, just kind of get into the yumminess and the possibilities of this. Because I am excited for the more people to know about this, for individual folks and for practitioners to really think critically about how do I care for the mental health of my patients, um, and how do I advocate for my own mental health so that, we can come together and make this work. Thank you so much, Sonja, for being here and sharing all of this wonderful information with folks who are listening to Be the Bloom.
Thank you for having me.
There was a lot shared today, and I want to encourage folks listening to connect with what resonated with you most. Consider one practice you can take from here and move into learning more about or even practicing if it feels appropriate to do so. If you would like to support the work of Cactus and Bloom to bring you these type of conversations and to do culture change work that builds skills, creates awareness, and improves equitable care for survivors of childhood sexual abuse and sexual violence in adulthood, consider a donation. Your contribution can make a world of difference. And together, let's see what blooms.